Oh my gosh, this is the miracle cure that I've been missing for the first 10 years of practice. What was I thinking? He had suddenly gone blind overnight. And so I made an appointment with a neurologist, had him seen, and he was diagnosed with something called granulomatous meningoencephalitis. And I said, well, that's basically a lot of inflammation of his brain. What caused that? And the neurologist said it probably came from his distemper vaccination. And by the way, the biggest pet food companies are human food companies, Mars and Nestle Purina. So yeah, they excel at making candy bars maybe, and fast food, but that doesn't translate into making good pet food.
Welcome to the Hope Natural Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Erin Ellis, your host. On this show, we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. Today, I have someone a little different on the show, and I think you are going to love this conversation. Dr. Judy Morgan is a holistic veterinarian with 39 years of clinical experience, certified in acupuncture, food therapy, and chiropractic care for dogs, cats, and horses. She is a best-selling author of 8 books, has been featured on Fox News, CNN, PBS, ABC, and CBS, and has been named the top holistic veterinarian of the decade by the International Association of Top Professionals. Here's why I wanted to have her on. Dr. Judy started her career as a conventional veterinarian following the standard protocols, and she kept watching pets, especially those with chronic conditions, not get any better. So she went deeper. She studied traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, integrated holistic and conventional care in her 2 award-winning practices, and has spent the last several decades educating and empowering pet owners to move away from ultra-processed food, unnecessary chemicals, and over-vaccination, and toward whole food nutrition and natural healing. If you've ever felt dismissed by a doctor who told you everything looks normal, you're going to find this conversation very familiar, just with a different patient. Dr. Judy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yay! So tell me a little bit more about how you went from conventional veterinary medicine to becoming one of the most well-known voices in holistic pet care.
It was a bit accidental, but I think God wanted me to follow this path. And so I ended up at a chiropractic class. I did not know that we were going to be talking about chiropractic. It was advertised as something else. And after I'd been there for a little while, I thought, I really think this guy's talking about chiropractic. I don't know if I believe in this or not, but paid a lot of money, stuck it out, went back to work the following week and went, oh my gosh, this is the miracle cure that I've been missing for the first 10 years of practice. What was I thinking? And because it was so successful and animals that were carried in were running out, I said, well, there must be other things out there that I need to learn about. And so I started looking at all different kinds of things. And then once you hang out that shingle that says you do something a little different than everybody else, you start getting different clients coming in the door. And all of those clients taught me so much more. They would bring in all kinds of weird things that they had been looking at, like raindrop therapy and light therapy, color therapy. And it exploded from there. And it just meant that I had a lot more tools in my toolbox than I had prior.
I love that. What were you seeing that made you know something had to change?
Well, frankly, it's actually my very first kind of run-in with maybe what we're doing is not working was my own dog. I had a Doberman who was only a few years old, and I was bedridden, pregnant for my son who was sitting on my sciatic nerve and I couldn't walk. Which weirdly, a chiropractor was the one who cured that. So there you go. But my dog, I went to let him out and he was fine the night before. And when we let him out in the morning, he ran out the door, ran straight into the side of the car and knocked himself out because he was blind. He had suddenly gone blind overnight. And so I made an appointment with a neurologist, had him seen, and he was diagnosed with something called granulomatous meningoencephalitis. And I said, well, that's basically a lot of inflammation of his brain. What caused that? And the neurologist said it probably came from his distemper vaccination. And at that time, we were told vaccinate every animal every year with everything. And of course, I was very traditional. That's what I was taught, and that's what I did. And so he was only a few years old, but he had already had a ton of vaccinations. And that was sort of the first wake-up call of maybe what we're doing is not the right way to go. And that poor dog was treated with very high doses of steroids and immunosuppressants for over a year. The poor guy was just like a drinking, peeing mess. He lost all his hair. He developed fungal infections. He was a mess because of all of the medication that was used to treat the problem that was caused by his vaccination. And once I took my first acupuncture course, they started talking about food and how we can use food to heal. And I will never forget, when I went to vet school, we only had one set of therapeutic or prescription diets, and that was the Hill's alphabet soup. And so in medicine class, we learned, well, if they have kidney disease, you give them KD. If the cats have urinary problems, you give them CD. If they have heart problems, they get HD. There's a letter for, every diet. And I was sitting in my very first acupuncture class, and somebody sitting next to me said, oh, yeah, that killer diet. I'm like, what are you talking about? She says, KD, killer diet. I said, excuse me? And that was my first introduction to maybe we should look at the ingredients in pet food. Maybe we should look at how it's made. Maybe we should look at what our animals are supposed to eat versus what we're feeding. That was so eye-opening for me. And that started this whole journey of using food therapy and really looking at what we are being taught, the influence that is applied to the veterinary field, just like the human field, by big pharma and big food companies. And by the way, the biggest pet food companies are human food companies, Mars and Nestle Purina. So yeah, they excel at making candy bars maybe, and fast food, but that doesn't translate into making good pet food.
No, so let's talk a little bit about pet food, because I think most pet owners have no idea what's actually in their food they're buying, probably the same lines as what they're putting in their own mouth, right? So what's really going on in that industry, and what should pet owners be looking for or avoiding on their dog or their pet food label?
So if you think about where the pet food is in the grocery store, it's in the middle. It's with all the ultra-processed food. And we are being told, and we should know, shop the perimeter of the grocery store if you want to feed your family better using whole foods, nutrient-dense foods, rather than ultra-processed foods. And unfortunately, in the pet food industry, probably very similar to the human food industry, the words natural and holistic have zero meaning at all. So you can buy a pet food that has natural and holistic and pictures of steak and blueberries and peas on the cover, and you think you're buying great food. And instead, what you are buying is dead, burnt, brown balls of not very nutrient-dense food that has had vitamins and minerals added back into it to supply the minimum requirements that are needed. And it's also sprayed with fats and palatants, something, those natural flavors that are not so natural, that are used to be attractive to your pet to make them want to eat it. And the problem with these extruded foods, they're made the same way that the Kellogg's brothers designed the extruders to process cereal. And so the extruders cook the food at very high heat and high pressure because it's forced through a die. But it also has to have a starch to hold it together. So when we're feeding a dry pet food, it's going to be about 50% carbohydrates or starches to hold it together. The maximum amount of meat protein that can go into that is about 30%. Otherwise, it won't go through the machine. And our cats are obligate carnivores. That means they're supposed to eat meat. And instead, we are feeding them corn and wheat and soy and peas It's not what they're meant to eat. And we have a huge problem with kitty cat obesity, pancreatitis, diabetes, because we're not, and urinary issues, because we're not feeding them correctly. Our dogs can do a little bit better with more plant matter in their diet, but it's not really what they were designed to eat if we look at their dentition and their nutritional or their GI tract. So they are really meant to eat a diet that is much higher in meats and organ meats, and they need a calcium source. So in the wild, that would be raw bone. So we are seeing now, because people are getting smarter about what they're feeding their pets, they're getting smarter about what they're feeding themselves, and the two tend to track together. When people are really looking at their own nutrition, then all of a sudden they start saying, hey, wait a minute, what about this dry stuff I'm putting in the bowl? Is that the best? And so what we are seeing now is that the fastest growing segment of the pet food space is fresh, minimally processed, or raw foods. And I am so excited to see that. And we are seeing many, many more smaller, really good companies coming on board. On my website, naturalhealthypets.com, people can download a list of the foods that I'm willing to feed my own pets. Okay. And on truthaboutpetfood.com, Susan Thixton has a longer list that is very highly researched. So definitely worth looking at. She also posts any recalls for food companies, whether it's bacterial contamination or plastic found in the food, metal found in the food, whatever the problem is, vitamin imbalances. And unfortunately, big pet food has a big hold on the veterinary industry. And so when you're standing on the other side of the exam table with your animal, your veterinarian is most likely going to recommend that you stick only with the dead, dry brown balls or cans made by the big three manufacturers, which is Mars, Purina, and Hills. Royal Canin is part of Mars, but that's what the veterinarians recommend because that's who funds most of their nutritional studies and research.
Kind of just like Big Farm, right?
Big Farm has a big hand in it too.
Well, I mean, for humans, it's like,
Big Farm has a big hand in veterinary medicine. Big hand.
Yeah, for sure.
Not in a good way.
No, and that's good that there's a few resources. I didn't know about those, so we'll make sure we'll include those in the show notes. Because, if you're a pet owner, you go to, a pet food store, and it's overwhelming. There's so many different foods and.
Yeah, and really what I would recommend is find a small independent pet store, not the big box stores. Find an independent pet store. And if you walk in there and they have freezers and refrigerators full of food, you're doing better because those are the minimally processed, fresher foods. So I'm a huge fan of raw feeding. I've fed my pets raw food for over 25 years. I've never had an issue. Most of my patients were raw fed, never had an issue with that. But for people who are afraid of that, because CDC, AVMA, and the veterinary industry has done such a good job at scaring people, if you want to feed gently cooked, that is fine as well. Gently cooked doesn't have near the problems that the extrusion, high heat, highly processed food has.
I feed mine Pet's Table from HelloFresh. Have you heard of?
Okay.
It's newer.
I know HelloFresh. I haven't looked at their food.
Yeah, it's human grade.
Right.
I've looked
Which
at
a lot of people are moving toward human grade for our pets. And we get a lot of pushback because, and actually I'm preparing a talk on this right now, 44% of pet food ingredients is upcycled leftovers from the human food industry. So some of that is good. People don't really want to eat liver and kidney and heart, and those are so nutrient dense, and our pets love them. So that is really good upcycling. When we look at spent brewer's grains, it's been used to make beer, and now we have the leftovers, or we have the poor quality grains that are broken and moldy. That all goes to pet food. And as a pet parent, I don't want to feed my pets moldy, fumigated, rotten meats. And like if you ever get to go to a slaughterhouse, really fun. But as they're cutting up a cow or a pig or chickens, the good cuts of meat go in to the human food chain. The bad cuts of meat that might be spoiled, might have a tumor in them, something like that, it goes into big barrels, and those barrels go to pet food. So our pets are really second-class citizens when it comes to the ultra-processed pet food.
Ugh. Well, we can do better if we know better, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about the medications, the little jabby jabs these poor pets get. I mean, they follow them without question because that's what their vet recommends. So what does the research actually show, and how do you help pet owners have a more informed conversation about what their pet truly needs versus like what's routine?
Right. So there is no one size fits all, even though a lot of times when you walk in, they say, well, all dogs get these vaccines, or all puppies get this series of vaccines, all cats get these. And really, it's about educating yourself. And this is where my books and my website can be very helpful. The Raising Naturally Healthy Pets book, the longest chapter is on vaccination. And so you need to know, how would your pet contract a disease? Does your pet go to boarding, grooming, daycare? Is your dog a hunting dog, or does it live in a high-rise apartment in the city? Your pet is an individual, and you need to determine what diseases might your pet be exposed to, what is required by your groomer, boarding, daycare, or your veterinarian, because a lot of them now have requirements, which is a little bit over the top. And then also, we are stuck with having to get rabies vaccines, which almost every township or municipality says that your pet has to be up to date on rabies vaccines, which is every 3 years. If you have a smaller breed of dog, you don't want to give multiple vaccines at the same time. You do them one at a time. They are much more likely to react. And there are certain vaccines that I would never even give to small dogs because they're too likely to have a really bad reaction. We now also have the problem that they have made 3 different self-amplifying RNA vaccines for our pets. One is rabies, one is feline leukemia, and the third one is influenza for dogs. And there hasn't been near enough testing on these vaccines. We don't know about shedding, and we are seeing a lot of really adverse event reactions happening, like bad ones, pets dying. And so it's really up to the pet owner to educate yourselves about what your pet needs and which vaccine are you going to request, rather than just blindly saying, oh, he's due for that? Okay. No, because just because he's due on paper doesn't mean that he necessarily needs it. So you really need to know. And we do know that the core vaccines may last a lifetime. Those puppy or kitten shots that they get may last a lifetime. It is recommended now for the core vaccines that they not be given any more often than every 3 to 5 years, yet a good percentage of veterinarians still recommend annual. And the same with boarding, grooming, daycare. So it's an education problem with them. We need to educate them that, no, we don't need all of these every year. So it's really up to, unfortunately, the pet parent to be educated so that you can make informed decisions and you can decline what you think is absolutely not necessary for your pet. I'm not anti-vax, but I'm a huge minimalist because the more vaccines we give, the more likely we are to get reactions and autoimmune disease. So if let's say you get a reminder in the mail that your dog hasn't had a distemper vaccine for 3 years and they recommend every 3 years, you can go in and ask for a blood test called a titer. And that titer will tell you either there are antibodies there and they have protection or there aren't. And if there aren't, then a booster might make sense. But if they already have antibodies present, there's no need to give a booster. Unfortunately, a lot of the labs charge very high fees for the titers, and therefore the veterinarians charge very high fees for the titers. And veterinary visits have gotten so expensive that, as a client, you stand there and go, oh my gosh, you're going to charge me $400 for that titer and the vaccine's only $39. I think I'll go ahead for the vaccine, which is all great and wonderful if your pet doesn't have a reaction. I will say that the Kansas State University Veterinary Diagnostic Lab charges very low fees for their titers. And so if your veterinarian is giving you a very high quote for a titer, ask them where they send it. And if they're not sending it to Kansas State, tell them to open an account with Kansas. It'll be a lot cheaper. Yeah. And there are some labs where you can actually, if your vet draws the blood, you can send it in yourself for the titer and save a lot of money. So there are ways around it.
Should a pet owner ask that for any vaccine that's recommended?
So we don't have titers for all vaccines.
Oh,
we
okay.
have them for the core vaccines. So for cats, it's going to be their distemper or panleukopenia. For dogs, it's distemper, hepatitis, parvo. We can get titers for rabies. Unfortunately, most licensing bodies, if you have to license your dog with the city, they don't accept the titers, which some cities and states have been working hard to change that, but lots and lots of resistance because there's a huge vaccine lobby.
What about the heartworm medication?
So heartworm, again, depends on your pet's exposure. I never gave it to cats in my practice. My practices were in southern New Jersey. We have lots and lots of mosquitoes along the shore in the summer. I live in the South now. I do not give heartworm preventative to my dogs, but they have limited exposure because they're not outside dogs. And if the mosquitoes come out in the evening, we go back in the house. If I do need to stay outside, then I'm spraying an essential oil spray that is going to repel mosquitoes so that they don't get bitten. We have really good information. We actually have a whole book on parasites and parasite prevention, including heartworms. But there's also a really good blog on the website that talks about how the heartworms are spread, what the temperature has to be. So there are areas in this country where heartworms are not a problem. If you live in Arizona, Colorado, you don't have a big problem with heartworms.
Really?
You can look up the American Heartworm Society. They put out a map every year. I just printed out the new 2025 map. And so the place where we have the biggest problem is the Deep South, along the Mississippi River Valley, Texas, along the Gulf. That's where we have the biggest problem. And so that's where people want to be the most diligent about heartworm prevention or protection for your pets. And the thing with heartworms, fleas, ticks, intestinal parasites, they are parasites. Parasites parasitize the weak. And so the stronger your dog's or cat's immune system is, the healthier they are, the less chronic disease they have, the less likely they are to be attacked by parasites. If you have an animal who is old and weak, so for instance, if I had a client who had a dozen cats, which I had a lot of those, they would bring a dozen cats in for an exam. And you have the young, robust, healthy, fat cats with the beautiful coats, and you might find a flea or two on them. And then you work your way through and you get to the 18-year-old, what I call dinosaur cats. They're a rack of bones with a rough coat, and they're barely walking. They just look rough, and they'll have 2,000 fleas on them. And that's because the fleas are like, oh, this one's weak. He can't even lick to groom me off. I'm not going to get eaten by this cat. I'm going to eat this cat. So, it's just a really good example of what parasites do. Parasites always go for the weak.
I mean, most illness goes for the weak, right?
Exactly.
Opportunistic infections.
You got it.
Where will I thrive, right? Mm-hmm. So I talk a lot on my show about the parallel between conventional medicine dismissing women and the way conventional veterinary medicine approaches pets. Do you see that same pattern? Like treating symptoms without really asking the why? Kind of like how you went from your Doberman.
Yeah, all the time. Traditional medicine is really about treating symptoms. It's how do we stop the itch? Oh, look, here's an immune suppressant. Here's something that will, fight against interleukin-13, which is, causes itching. We're always trying to kill the symptom rather than curing the underlying problem. And that's the problem with conventional medicine. And that is where integrated or holistic medicine really shines. It's like, he's itching because he's got an allergy. Okay, what's he got an allergy to? And what can I do to stop? I mean, an allergy is just an immune system that is overreacting. How do I calm that down? So we've done so much work now with microbiome testing and dysbiosis, and I would say that 95% of allergy problems, once we cure the microbiome and the leaky gut, then all of a sudden we don't have allergy problems. And when we get them on the correct diet, we don't have ear infections any longer. We don't have the chronic inflammatory problems. So for instance, I do a lot of dog and cat rescue, and my husband and I used to only take in the seniors because I'm a veterinarian. I can fix all their problems. And we've had so many dogs. We have one right now that we look at their x-rays, and their degenerative joint disease, their arthritis on radiographs is horrendous. It's like, oh, okay, you guys came with a big problem. And when we switch their diet, we get rid of all those things that are causing the inflammation in the body. The radiographs don't change, but the mobility and the pain changes drastically. So we've got an old guy right now. We don't know how old he is. His x-rays of his hips are terrible. And he chases the ball, races around the yard, jumps up from laying down. You'd never know. Like, I was shocked, actually. We x-rayed him because he hurt his leg running in the door. And when I saw the x-rays, I was flabbergasted. I was like, I had no clue that his x-rays would look like that, because his mobility is amazing and he doesn't show any pain. And so even though we have chronic disease that's there, we can make them feel so much better by fixing their diet and getting rid of all those toxins that are in their system. Another thing that I will say about similarities that we see in veterinary medicine and in so I'm older. I went through menopause a million years ago, and no one ever talked to me about HRT for the first 18 years. And when somebody finally did, I went, wait a minute, I wasted 18 years of my life. Why? Like, nobody ever mentioned this. But yet in veterinary medicine, we are now we have recommended spay neuter at 6 months forever, like literally forever. And we're now doing all these pediatric spay and neuter procedures on puppies and kittens as young as 8 weeks old. So we are literally taking a female and making her overnight menopausal at 6 months of age. And now we have all these studies saying, hey, you know what? Intact dogs have less cancer, have less arthritis, have less, like, a myriad of problems. And so now we're actually having to go back and look at, do we need to do HRT for our dogs? And we have a lot of good evidence now for neutered males. When we do a little replacement therapy with testosterone, not very many veterinarians are doing it, but their mobility and their muscling changes drastically. And we're not giving them anabolic steroids, like weightlifters. Yeah. We are doing replacement to make them back to what they are supposed to be. Yeah. And it is an incredible, incredible difference.
That is so cool. I didn't know that. Neat. But it makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. So we might have some overwhelmed listeners here that want to start making changes for their pets, but they're a little overwhelmed. Where do you actually begin? Like, what is the most impactful first step that you recommend?
So if you've never done anything in the holistic realm with your pets at all, probably the easiest book that I've written to get started is Raising Naturally Healthy Pets. Once you're more into it, then, we escalate from there. But that one is really made for how do I find a holistic veterinarian? If I have a traditional veterinarian, how do I talk to them about things that I want to do a little bit differently? Talks a lot about food, what's in the processed food versus, what benefits we see from less processed food. And like I said, it has the huge vaccine chapter. It also talks about heartworms, fleas, ticks, all that kind of stuff. So that's probably the best starting point. But our website has just a ton of blogs, a ton of information, a ton of free downloads. And if you're saying, oh my gosh, I don't want to feed this processed kibble anymore. I don't even know where to start. One, you can download our list of foods that we recommend. Two, we have a ton of free download recipes if you want to dabble in making some food for your dog or your cat yourself. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It can be really, really simple. You can make it in batches. At one point, my husband and I had 13 dogs.
Oh,
because we're a little crazy. We do a lot of rescue work. We had a bunch of cats too. But we were making all of our own food, and it was raw food. And so I bought a huge 1 horsepower meat grinder. And we would take 2 Sunday afternoons a month for about 2 hours each time and grind about 150 pounds of food. And so that would last us, and put it in the freezer, label it, and that would last us 2 weeks at a time to feed our dogs homemade, minimally processed food. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody has the freezer space for that. You don't have to do that. But that was after me studying this for many years and paying other people to make the food, and we had a lot of dogs. Mm-hmm. So, to me, to give up 4 hours a month to make food for 13 dogs that I knew was going to really serve them well was 100% worth it. Yeah. Not everybody has that time, that effort. It's really interesting how many people I talk to that don't know how to boil water or turn on their stove. So you don't have to. Somebody else can do that for you.
Wow. Well, this has been great. You mentioned your books, and we do have a code, a special unique code for all the listeners for 50% off any of Dr. Judy's books. So we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. It's Hope Natural 50. And I'm going to wrap it up with one question I ask all my podcast guests. What would be your best or favorite health tip that you could share with the audience? And it doesn't have to have anything to do with pets, but it can.
For yourself or your pets, and we have a farm because of this, eat whole foods, eat organic foods, like start your engine with something good. Like it's sort of like your car is not going to run well if you put in the cheapest, crappiest oil and gas and never take care of it. And it's the foundation of life. It starts everything. And the same goes for our pets as for ourselves. We have a farm where we raise all our own organic produce. We have dairy cows, so we drink raw milk and make our own cheese. We have egg-laying chickens. We have meat chickens. The difference in the health for our pets and our family is amazing when you get away from processed food and you start living that more natural life. Plus, it gets you outside and keeps you really busy if you're raising all that yourself. Not that everybody should do that, but it's great.
Yeah, I love that. Very, very sound advice for everyone, really. Do you have anything that you want to add that we might have missed that you feel is important for the listeners?
No, I would say just pick a starting point, start reading, start looking at the blogs, just start, go on our website, there's a search bar. And so whatever problem your pet has had, whether it's pancreatitis or cancer or allergies or arthritis, just type that in the search bar. The blogs will come up. Products will come up. You'll just glean a lot of information. So just start biting off little tiny chunks. Education is empowerment. And we want everyone to be empowered because we want your pets to stick around for 20 to 30 years, not 10.
Right. I'm with you there. Well, Dr. Judy, this has been wonderful. Her website is drjudymorgan.com. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, we'll put it all in the show notes with that code for the books. I really appreciate your time. It's been a great episode, and I know the listeners have learned something out there, so thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
That's a wrap, everyone. We'll see you again next week.